There is a kind of pain that doesn't scream, it whispers, and we spend our entire lives trying not to hear it. You've felt it, haven't you? That quiet ache that lives beneath everything you do. It's there when you wake up before dawn, staring at the ceiling. It's there in the middle of a conversation when you smile but feel absent. It's there in the noise, the endless scrolling, the podcasts, the plans, the distractions you stack like walls around something you don't want to face. We are so afraid of silence. Not the silence of a quiet room, but the silence where we might actually hear ourselves. The silence where the questions we've been running from finally catch up. The silence where the truth we've been avoiding sits down beside us and waits. And so we fill every gap. We talk more than we need to. We explain ourselves to people who didn't ask. We create problems to solve so we don't have to sit with the one problem that matters, the fracture inside us that no amount of achievement, validation, or noise can mend. You see, most of us are not living, we are performing. We are narrating our lives to an invisible audience, seeking approval for a script we didn't even write. We are so busy being seen that we forget to see ourselves. And in that forgetting, something breaks. The mystics knew this. The Sufis spoke of it as fana, the dissolution of the false self, not destruction, but a quiet unburdening, a letting go of the costume, the character, the endless commentary that runs through your mind like a radio you can't turn off. Healing doesn't begin with answers. It doesn't begin with affirmations or strategies or the next self-help book that promises you'll finally feel whole. Healing begins when you stop explaining, when you stop defending, when you stop pretending that the noise is working. Honest silence is not emptiness. It is fullness without distortion. It is the moment you stop translating your experience into words and just raw, unedited. True, think of it this way. You are standing in a room full of mirrors, and each mirror reflects a different version of you. The version your parents wanted, the version your culture expected, the version you built to survive your pain. And you've been moving from mirror to mirror, asking which one is real. But none of them are. The real you exists in the space between reflections, in the stillness before you perform, in the breath before you speak, in the moment before you decide who you need to be. And that space, that honest silence, is where healing begins. Let me tell you something difficult. Your wounds are not asking to be fixed. They are asking to be witnessed. There is a difference. To fix something is to impose control. To witness something is to offer presence. And most of us have spent our lives trying to fix ourselves through achievement, through therapy, through relationships, through spiritual practices, when what we actually needed was to stop fixing and start listening. Because the pain you carry is not a mistake. It is a message. It's your soul's way of saying, something here needs attention. Something here is unfinished. Something here is still waiting to be felt. But we don't want to feel it. Feeling it means slowing down. Feeling it means sitting with discomfort. Feeling it means acknowledging that we don't have all the answers, that we're not as healed as we pretend to be, that beneath the surface we are still tender, still unfinished, still human. And so we distract. We numb. We rationalize. We spiritualize our avoidance and call it growth. But growth is not the absence of pain. Growth is the willingness to sit with it, to breathe into it, to let it speak without interruption. Honest silence is the space where you stop managing your inner life and start inhabiting it. It's where you stop being the narrator and become the listener. It's where you stop asking, "How do I get rid of this?" and start asking, "What is this trying to show me?" So what does this look like in your life? It's simpler than you think and harder than you imagine. It looks like this. You're in the middle of a hard day, and instead of immediately calling someone, texting someone, turning on something to fill the space you sit, you breathe. You let the discomfort be there without trying to solve it. It looks like this. You're about to explain yourself for the 10th time, and you pause. You realize that the person who needs to understand you most is you. And maybe you don't need their validation. Maybe you need your own honesty. It looks like this. You notice the story you're telling yourself about why you feel the way you feel. And instead of believing it, defending it, or sharing it, you let it dissolve. You return to the raw sensation beneath the story. The tightness in your chest. The weight in your stomach. The quiet grief you've been carrying like a stone. You don't analyze it. You don't perform around it. You just let it be. Because healing begins not when you understand everything, but when you stop needing to. There is a kind of silence that feels like coming home. Not the silence of isolation, but the silence of arrival. The silence where you are no longer at war with yourself. Where you are no longer performing, explaining, defending. Where you are simply here, present, honest, whole. That silence is not the end of your pain, but it is the beginning of your healing. We tell ourselves we'll face the truth when we're ready. But readiness is just another word for later. And later is where healing goes to die. How many times have you said it? I'm not ready yet. I'll deal with this when I'm stronger. I'll be honest with myself once I have more clarity, more support, more time. And in the meantime, you keep moving. You keep working. You keep smiling through dinners and answering, "I'm fine." When people ask how you are, you keep building a life on top of a foundation that's crumbling, hoping that if you stay busy enough, you won't feel the ground shift beneath you. But here's the truth, you will never feel ready. Readiness is a myth we invented to avoid discomfort. It's a permission slip we keep signing for ourselves, always dated tomorrow. It's the voice that says, "Not yet, not like this, not now." And that voice is not protecting you, it is imprisoning you. Because the longer you wait to be honest with yourself, the more you build around the lie. You build relationships around it. You build careers around it. You build an entire identity around the version of yourself that doesn't have to feel the thing you're afraid to feel. And one day, you wake up and realize you are living someone else's life. A life designed to avoid one moment of honest silence. The spiritual teachers speak of this as spiritual bypassing the tendency to use spiritual ideas to avoid psychological wounds. We meditate to escape discomfort instead of meeting it. We practice gratitude to cover up grief. We talk about oneness while refusing to acknowledge our own fragmentation. But true healing is not transcendence. It is integration. It is the willingness to bring everything into the light, not just the beautiful parts, not just the parts that fit the story of who you want to be, everything, the jealousy, the shame, the rage you've been politely suppressing for years. the loneliness you've been calling independence, the fear you've been calling practicality. Honest silence is where you stop curating your inner life and start living it. It's where you stop waiting for readiness and start trusting presence. Because readiness implies that there is a better version of you who will handle this later. But that version doesn't exist. There is only you, here, now, with the pain you're carrying and the courage you're choosing. And the moment you stop waiting the moment, you sit in the silence and say, okay, I'm here. Show me. Everything changes. Not because the pain disappears, but because you stop being afraid of it. Alan Watts once said, the only way to make sense out of change is to plunge into it, move with it, and join the dance. But we don't want to dance with our pain. We want to watch it from a distance. We want to understand it intellectually before we feel it emotionally. We want a map before we take the first step. But healing is not a map. It is a falling. It is a surrendering. It is the moment you realize that you cannot think your way into wholeness. You can only feel your way there. And that terrifies us. Because feeling means vulnerability. Feeling means admitting that we don't have it all together. Feeling means letting the armor crack and the tears come and the truth spill out in ways we can't control. So we wait. We wait for the perfect therapist, the perfect partner, the perfect moment when we'll finally be strong enough to be weak. But here's what waiting does. It calcifies the wound. It turns temporary pain into permanent identity. It transforms a moment of hurt into a lifetime of hiding. And the longer you hide, the more you forget that you are not the wound. You are the one who can heal it. So let me ask you, what are you waiting for? What truth are you avoiding in the name of readiness? What conversation are you postponing until you feel more confident, more articulate, more together? What grief are you refusing to feel because you're afraid it will break you? Here's the practice. Stop waiting. Today, not tomorrow. Not when you're ready, sit in honest silence for 5 minutes. Set a timer if you need to. Sit somewhere you won't be disturbed. And instead of meditating on peace or gratitude or any destination state, simply ask, what am I avoiding right now? And then listen, not for answers, not for solutions. Just listen. Let whatever is there be there. Let the discomfort rise. Let the stories come. Let the feelings move through you like weather. And notice what happens when you stop resisting. Notice how the fear you've been running from is often smaller than the running itself. Notice how the grief you've been avoiding wants nothing from you except acknowledgement. Notice how honest silence doesn't destroy you, it reveals you. I know this is hard. I know it feels safer to wait, to prepare, to build more strength before you face what's inside. But strength is not built in avoidance. Strength is built in the facing. Every time you choose honesty over comfort, you grow. Every time you sit with discomfort, instead of distracting from it, you heal. Every time you stop performing and start being present, you reclaim a piece of yourself. And slowly, not all at once, not in some dramatic transformation, you begin to realize you were never broken. You were just afraid to be whole. Because wholeness includes the parts you've been rejecting. Wholeness includes the sadness, the confusion, the doubt. Wholeness is not the absence of pain, it is the integration of everything you are. And you cannot integrate what you refuse to feel. So stop waiting for readiness. Stop waiting for the right moment, the right mood, the right level of strength. The moment is now. The readiness is presence. And the healing begins the second you stop running and simply sit. In honest silence, with yourself, as you are. We are brilliant architects of our own prisons. We build them with plans, goals, distractions, and noise, and we call it productivity. We call it ambition. We call it living. Look at your life for a moment. Really look. How much of what you do is genuinely chosen, and how much is carefully constructed to keep you from feeling something you don't want to feel. That project you threw yourself into when your relationship started falling apart. That promotion you chased when you started questioning your purpose. That busy social calendar you maintain so you're never alone with your thoughts. That constant stream of content you consume, podcasts while you cook, videos while you eat, music while you walk, so there's never a gap, never a pause, never a moment where you might hear the question your soul is asking. We have become masters of distraction. And we wear our business like a badge of honor, as if exhaustion is proof of meaning, as if constant motion means we're going somewhere. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Most of our doing is undoing. Most of our striving is fleeing. Most of our ambition is avoidance, dressed in attractive clothing. The Sufis have a teaching. The wound is the place where the light enters you. But we don't want the light to enter. We want to seal the wound, cover it, pretend it was never there. We want to be whole without ever being broken. We want to be healed without ever being honest about the hurt. And so we build personas. We build narratives. We build entire lives designed around not feeling the thing that needs to be felt. We become successful to avoid feeling inadequate. We become helpful to avoid feeling our own needs. We become spiritual to avoid being human. We become so obsessed with healing that we never actually stop to acknowledge what's broken. This is the architecture of avoidance. And it is astonishingly sophisticated, because it doesn't look like avoidance. It looks like growth. It looks like self-improvement. It looks like someone who has their life together. But beneath the surface, beneath the productivity and the plans and the positive mindset, there is a person who is terrified. Terrified that if they stop moving, they'll have to face what they've been running from. Terrified that if they sit in honest silence, the whole carefully constructed identity will collapse. And maybe it will. But that collapse is not the end. It is the beginning. Carl Jung said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." And this is what we resist most. Not the pain itself, but the consciousness it brings. The awareness, the truth. Because once you see, you cannot unsee. Once you acknowledge the wound, you cannot pretend it's not there. Once you admit that you've been avoiding yourself, you have to decide, will you keep running, or will you finally stop? This is why honest silence is so radical. It is not passive. It is the most active thing you can do. It is the choice to stop managing, controlling, and performing, and to simply be present with what is. And what is often uncomfortable. What is often unfinished. What is often not the polished version of yourself you present to the world. But what is real. And real is where healing begins. Let's get specific. Let's name the patterns. You avoid silence by staying busy. Every hour planned, every moment filled. Because silence means confronting the emptiness you feel even when you're surrounded by people. You avoid honesty by staying surface level. You talk about the weather, the news, the latest show everyone's watching. Because honesty means revealing that you're lonely, confused, or struggling, and that feels like failure. You avoid feeling by staying in your head. You analyze, rationalize, philosophize. You turn your pain into a problem to solve rather than an experience to have. Because feeling means losing control, and you've spent your whole life trying to maintain it. You avoid the present by staying in the future. Always planning, always preparing, always working toward the next thing. Because the present contains the discomfort you've been postponing, and as long as you're focused on later, you don't have to deal with now. Do you see it? Do you see how intricate the avoidance is? It's not laziness. It's not weakness. It's intelligent, adaptive, protective. It served you once. It helped you survive. But what helped you survive is now preventing you from living. So here's the practice for this section. For the next 3 days, notice your patterns of avoidance. Don't judge them. Don't try to fix them. Just notice. Notice when you reach for your phone the moment you feel bored or uncomfortable. Notice when you say yes to plans you don't actually want because being alone feels too heavy. Notice when you start explaining yourself or over-sharing because silence in conversation feels unbearable. Notice when you launch into problem-solving mode the moment someone shares something vulnerable, because sitting with their pain might make you feel your own. Just notice. And then, once a day, choose differently. Instead of reaching for the distraction, sit with the discomfort for 60 seconds. Instead of filling the silence, let it be. Instead of explaining, breathe. Instead of fixing, witness. 60 seconds. That's all. Because honest silence is a muscle. And like any muscle, it gets stronger with practice. You don't need to meditate for an hour. You don't need to go on a retreat. You just need to stop for 1 minute and see what happens when you do. The architecture of avoidance is impressive. You built it with care, with intelligence, with good reason. But it has become a cage, and the door was never locked. You can walk out any time you choose. Not by tearing it down, not by hating yourself for building it, but by simply stepping into honest silence and saying, I see you. I see what I've been avoiding, and I'm ready to stop running. Not because you're strong enough, but because you're tired of being afraid. There is a version of you that existed before the world told you who to be. And honest silence is how you find your way back. You were born whole. Not perfect, but whole. You cried when you hurt. You laughed when you were delighted. You reached for what you wanted. You turned away from what you didn't. You existed without explanation, without apology, without the need to justify your existence. And then, slowly, the world taught you otherwise. You learned that some feelings were acceptable and others were not. You learned that some parts of you were lovable and others needed to be hidden. You learned that to belong, you had to perform. To be safe, you had to comply. To be valued, you had to achieve. And so you began the long process of self-abandonment, not dramatically, not all at once, but incrementally, a little compromise here, a small betrayal there. A moment where you swallowed your truth because speaking it felt too risky. A moment where you smiled when you wanted to scream. A moment where you said yes when every cell in your body was saying no. And over time, those moments accumulated. They formed layers, layers of conditioning, expectation, adaptation. Layers so thick that you forgot there was anything underneath. You forgot who you were before you learned who you were supposed to be. But that version of you, the unedited, unperformed, unconditioned you is still there, beneath the noise, beneath the narratives, beneath the roles and the masks and the carefully constructed identity, still there, waiting, in the silence. The mystics call it remembering. Not learning something new, but uncovering something ancient. Something that was always there, but got buried under years of forgetting. Healing begins in honest silence, because silence is where the layers dissolve. In silence, you are not a job title, a relationship status, a set of accomplishments. You are not the story you tell about yourself or the story others tell about you. You are not your trauma, your mistakes, your regrets. You are not even your hopes, your dreams, your aspirations. In silence, you are simply presence, awareness, being. And in that being, there is a recognition I am not what happened to me. I am not what I've done. I am not even what I think. I am the one who witnesses all of it. This is the return to self. Not to the ego, self the constructed identity, but to the true self. The self that exists prior to thought, prior to story, prior to the endless commentary that narrates your life. It is the self that does not need fixing, because it was never broken. It is the self that does not need validation, because it is already whole. It is the self that does not need to become anything, because it already is. But let's be clear, this is not about transcending your humanity. This is not about rising above your emotions or becoming some detached, enlightened being who floats through life untouched. The return to self is the return to your full humanity. All of it. The light and the shadow, the strength and the vulnerability, the clarity and the confusion. It is the moment you stop dividing yourself into acceptable and unacceptable parts and simply embrace the wholeness of your experience. Because here's what honest silence reveals. You are not one thing. You are not just the hurt or just the healed. You are not just the seeker or just the finder. You are the entire journey. And when you stop trying to be only the parts of yourself that are comfortable, presentable, or impressive, when you stop performing your own life, you discover something radical. You are enough, not because you've achieved enough or healed enough or become enough, but because enough is not a destination. It is a recognition. It is the moment you stop measuring yourself against an imaginary standard and simply exist as you are. So how do you return? How do you find your way back to the self you abandoned? You practice honest silence. Not once, not as a weekend retreat or a New Year's resolution, but as a way of being. You practice it in small moments throughout your day. When you're about to speak and you pause just for a breath to ask, is this true? Is this mine? Or am I saying what I think I should say? When you're making a decision and you step back from all the advice, all the opinions, all the external noise, and you ask, what do I actually want? When you're feeling something uncomfortable, and instead of immediately trying to change it, fix it, or understand it, you just let it be there. You breathe with it. You make space for it. This is how you return. Not through grand gestures or dramatic transformations, but through small acts of honesty, small moments of presence, small choices to stop abandoning yourself. And here's what happens when you do this consistently. The wounds don't disappear, but your relationship to them changes. The pain is still there, but it no longer defines you. The questions remain, but you stop needing all the answers. Because you realize healing is not about becoming someone new. It's about returning to who you've always been beneath the layers of who you thought you had to become. It's about coming home to yourself, not to a fixed, finished version of yourself, but to the living, breathing, ever-evolving presence that you are. The you that can hold joy and sorrow simultaneously. The you that can be uncertain and still move forward. The you that can be imperfect and still worthy. The you that exists in this moment, exactly as you are, not waiting to be ready, not waiting to be healed, not waiting to be anything other than present. So let this be your permission. You don't have to have it all figured out. You don't have to be healed, enlightened, or transformed. You don't have to be anything other than honest. Honest with yourself, about where you are, about what you feel, about what you need. Because healing begins not when you become someone else, but when you stop pretending to be anyone other than who you are. And that beginning, that honest, vulnerable, imperfect beginning happens in silence. Not the silence of isolation, not the silence of suppression, but the silence of recognition. The silence where you finally stop running, stop performing, stop explaining, and you simply arrive here, now, as you are, whole, not because you have no wounds, but because you've finally stopped being at war with them. Healing begins in honest silence, not because silence fixes everything, but because silence is where you remember. You were never broken. You were just hiding, and now finally you're ready to be found, by yourself, in the quietest, truest, most honest moment. This one,